going to go over some of this idea of natural method hinging, natural method squatting. So these are things that I do on these days leading up to competition. They're good warm ups. They're good for deload weeks. They're good uh, morning mobility. But the goal here is we're going to take a few different movement archetypes and we're going to explore them as opposed to saying, this is my squat for the day or this is my hinge for the day and working a very specific type. We're going to explore them through a few different lenses. So you have the lens of intensity, which is our traditional lens, right? So that is probably going to be more reserved for our barbell movements, our weighted movements, etc., etc. Things we're trying to push heavy. We have the lens of range, which is going to be a little bit more likely to be used during natural method. You can obviously scale intensity to a degree, particularly on upper body exercises. Um, you have the scale or the lens of speed, you have the lens of complexity, and you have the lens of unilateral versus bilateral. So let's just get right into it. So talking about hinging, very simple, is just to spend a little bit of time hinging. You can switch this up and do things like split stances to get a little bit different of a feel for that hinge. If you look at my feet, you can see that I have a slight elevation of the heel, right? So I'm actually giving myself that little bit of a foot stimulus. Talked about that in the past. It's actually pretty easy to get or to sneak in a little foot stimulus. Here I'm throwing in some rotation, so we're getting that coiling action where I'm lengthening the side of my body with the back. So you can do the long side, short side, boom. There's my rotation. Can hit the different airplane style maneuvers. Right, this is all in action, hinging. The airplane doesn't look like much. Many people, after 20 reps or so, actually feel quite a burn. They're just not strong there. Can hinge quickly to the point where you are almost jumping, shooting forward. You can really work on the balance aspect, right? So one leg completely off the ground. Can hinge. I don't really have to worry so much about bending the back, not bending the back, because I'm just not weighted. I can start to reach here, and here I'm emphasizing different rotation in the hip, right? So here I'm very externally rotated. So it's kind of like a pigeon. Here, I'm going to go very internally rotated. Try to reach down, right? I can have fully straight legs. I can go wide, right? Start getting into kind of the standing pancake variations, right? Standing pancake is a version of hinging. Boom. I can go more Jefferson curl. Can focus on bouncing at the bottom. That's ballistic stretching. Ballistic stretching is just viewing it through the lens of range and speed. I can upgrade the intensity by taking one leg, putting on the ball of my foot. So it's more of a kickstand. I can really focus. Boom. on this leg, right? So that's the intensity, that's bilateral to unilateral. That stuff will make you a lot more flexible. You know, if we start to view flexibility training as tension training, start to have a lot more flexible people. Let's take a look at maybe a little bit more squatting. I think we might have a B attack here. So obviously, vámonos. You have your traditional squatting, right? So you can go, I can squat, but I can also squat Hindu squats. We can once again elevate to being on the balls of our feet. We can choose to pause in this motion. We can do shrimps. We can do pistols, obviously, which, depending on the strength of your legs, might constitute as a pretty serious strength exercise. But if you're doing your squatting with bar, it can still be a little bit of strength exercise, but it's not like a big compound for you. We start to do the curtsy lunges, right? So you have things like the Cossack squat, different variations of the Cossack squat, split squat, boom. And variations that I like a lot are these, getting to that split squat. Just like I was talking about before in the chat, you can turn the you can turn the hinge with the landmine into a split squat stance, right? It's the same thing, but you're going to squat, and that gives you that little bit of rotation of the hip. Here I am, once again, carrying that floating heel, getting that little bit of foot stimmy. These are really solid to go short range, right? Short range pulses can do a lot of work. These will get surprisingly tiring surprisingly quickly, but it's not something you can't recover from, right? There's not a lot of damage happening. It's like a blood pump. You can start to lower down. Once you can start hitting those pulses. You can go lower still, hitting those pulses. If you have some form of elevation, then now I can get even lower. Start hitting a little bit of stimulus here, the very bottom position. It's also gonna be really good. Talked about curtsy squats recently, so be a really good way to start practicing for the dragon squat. I don't want to fall over that. That's a significant fall. All right. Here I can kind of take that curtsy dragon style. There I'm just touching my toe. Here I'll receive it and use that little bit of leg assistance to really get into the bottom. Get some pulses here, get a little bit stronger in that end range. Tripping on dogs. For speed, we can start to look at just little hopping, right? So this is short range, kind of like a pogo. And actually, once again, I'm just kind of keeping it more squatty. You can, of course, into a pogo. It can be one leg. You can get down to the deep tiers. So this is what I'm talking about when I'm referring to the Russian bounce. Or I can go out, feet flat, or I can go super wide. And all of them, you're putting your muscles at a stretch and putting force quickly through them. If you wanted to tear a tendon, a ligament, if you want to tear a muscle, the easiest way to do that would be to stretch it out, put a lot of force through it very quickly. And so the entire idea here with the deep tier plyos is that's what you're doing, but you're scaling it. So if you can stretch something and put force through it, and you can put force through it quickly, it is a more resilient tissue. You're just giving it that little micro dosage of what would tear it. So I think that's the closest you can get to being bulletproof. I really don't like that misnomer very much. But that is, in my opinion, the best way to possibly get there. You do have the step up variations like an ATG, right? So foot flat. That's the Patrick step up. You can obviously do this off of more elevation. Good way to at least get your knee prepared a little bit for pistols. You can raise it on something. That would be the Poliquin step up. I don't have anything to raise it on. And so here, this is the Peterson step up. Saw about this the other day in the chat. Said this was kind of a thing when I first started paying attention to ATG. It doesn't get talked about too much anymore. I think it's maybe a little too hard to get people to actually do because they'll lose balance, but I do think it's a worthwhile thing. We can practice some of the Goto metrics, or not metrics, but some of the Goto ideas. We've already practiced some of the WEC ideas with the coil. So I'll go here, and I'm going to inside ankle bone high. I'm going to quarter squat from here. So again, that floating heel. How about that foot strength? Boom. And trying to maintain, if that collapses at all, it's not that it's bad that you can collapse. In fact, I think it's a good thing that you can handle pressure here while collapsed. But that ability to maintain it and not to let it collapse, right? To say, I can keep this. I think when you have an inability to keep something, that's when it becomes a problem, not when you fall out of it. Speaking of collapse, we can work a little bit collapsing the legs, bring the knees in. There are squat variations. Proceed with some caution. Here I'm putting a little bit of pressure on the inside of the knee. You can start to develop into sissy squat-esque variations, right? So this would be very low barrier entry into the sissy squat. Most of this you can do on one leg, but bear in mind, it's gonna be more intense. Like I've done Russian bounces on one leg, but I did pay for it a little bit. It was a little bit too much for my knee. Good boy. You could obviously do split stance. Once again, into these sissy squats. You could just do actual sissy squat variations. Ooh, I don't have that today. There it is. I know I had something else that I was going to bring up in here. Trying to think of what I haven't gone over. Getting more narrow, everything more narrow tends to be a good way to open up the ankle mobility a little bit, especially if you can get flat. If all this is a little too much for you, or if you're recovering a little bit and maybe squatting is hurting your knees, you can go the backwards walking route. I do think that just hitting some of this stuff can do what backwards walking does. But there's other measures as well. Right, if I get down on my hands, then I can create a little bit of extra range of motion there, and I can intensify it by taking one leg off. All this stuff is, for the most part, fairly easy. And when you have these workouts like this that feel fairly easy and you can just do, this is what I would say, like, this is something that is about health and about some mobility. It can be a driver in performance in so much as you're increasing some range, you're increasing some balance. It's not necessarily going to be that big boom smash that you have from your compound lifts, but it will give you low level stimulus. And probably the more important thing, especially if you're like me and you love to hit big compound lifts, is it's going to give you stimulus kind of all over, stimulus that you're maybe missing because you're so focused on driving weight up, but you're not hitting the corners. I'll often tell my clients, like, we'll put them in a stretch and I'll say, you just got to explore the stretch a little bit. You got to find the corners. And that is what a lot of this stuff will allow you to do. I wasn't going to get too much into any pressing, but as long as we're here, we may as well. You can go shorter range, really just work the top end. Mid-range. All right, we talk about your bench. There's usually this point in the middle. It's where you're going to fail. Work the bottom. You can shift weight over to one side. Now I'm really just working the bottom here. Under stretch. Not really shooting necessarily for one-arm push-ups. Working more for, can I stress myself in these different positions that I don't normally see. Here I got a lot more stretch on the pec, on the shoulder, than I would for most of my pressing. It's a lot more like a bent press, right? Where you're pressing like so. So you're hitting that unseen angle of the shoulder. If I had dip bars, I could do the same thing where I explore those different ranges, top, middle, bottom of the range, really focusing on leaning forward to get to here. You can, of course, do that. Watch out. Watch out. Of course, do that on your push-ups. The closer that your hands get to your hips, the more shoulder you're going to activate in your push-ups, right? So even if we're not looking at one arm, even if we're not looking at dips, you can progress push-ups quite a bit on their own, up to and including late in the body lift, right? You could kind of see this is preparation a little bit. Watch out. Watch out. Over there. Oh my goodness. You can see this is preparation for the 90-degree. Super hard. with you licking me. Oh, Jeff's gonna love this. These are Jeff's dogs, by the way. So that's just some squatting, some hinging, some horizontal pressing. And obviously, like if you were putting together full body days, like you could literally just do this stuff when you're traveling, you're on vacation. You want a little bit of resistance training. Obviously, with body weight, unless you're amazing at pistols, shrimp squats, sissy squats, reverse Nordics, then you have things that you can do to progress your quad strength. Um, Same thing with upper body pressing, like handstand push-ups. Most people can't do. Like if you can't do it, then you can progress. Um, if you can't hit a 90-degree push-up, or if you can't hit a one-arm push-up strict, you have places to progress. Um, the hinge is probably the hardest one. The only good bodyweight hinges all require some form of setup, or I should say, strength wise, like to get a really strong strength stimulus, like you need something to be able to do a leg curl on, really more so than hinges. Whether that's hair up curls, Nordics, GHD, razor curls, I think they're called. They all do require some form of setup. Might not have to be huge, but setup nonetheless. And you know, there's a million ways you can take this. One extra thing I'll show that bears some mention is treating these things as locomotion. You can think of this as a complexity scale, right? So you can add in crawling to the mix. I would consider this not unlike an upper body press, but you can really play around with it, right? Forward, backward, removing a limb. Watch out. If you're like me and you were around during the golden age of Ido Portal, pre-Connor days, and you can start to do some of the lizard crawls. Give yourself a little obstacle. Those are all fantastic ways to strengthen the body. The duck walks can be paired a little bit maybe with your squats. The ostrich walk is probably a good one with your hinges. Talk about elasticity for the hinges. Trying to keep a straight leg. These are all ways to progress. Zero equipment that are very scalable, right? Like obviously super advanced maneuvers require some specific practice, but maybe you can find these little areas that just give you 1% more towards them, or towards your bench press or your back squat or whatever, or just keeping yourself healthy by hitting the things that aren't being hit in those big compound lifts. Anyway, we're on 24 minutes now, so I'm gonna let you guys go. Thanks for watching, and I hope this video is helpful.